Přece nechcete, abych zrušil příští týden mši. To je naprosto vyloučeno.
Josefe, tady pan farář by chtěl ještě jednu mši. Příští neděli.
Jo. V neděli, jo? No jo, neboj se, nějak to zařídíme. Pro jednou by to snad šlo.
Ale s tím já nechci mít nic společného.
To je nádhera, co? Chodej na to, he?
Hergo, zadevejte ty dveře, dělejte průmá.
To je bohovský prostředí, člověče, tady. A kdybychom sundali ty lustry, víš?
Snad to nechtějí zavřít.
To se uvidí.
Vzduch se tady ani nehne, jo? Je parádička, víc? Dívej se na to.
What this film is about and what it was for me was to understand how to live under tyranny. And I knew also everybody, Havel, Landowski, all the dissidents, but I wanted to talk about people who were not in Prague, who were outside of Prague. And I also wanted to say that people could actually resist, that people could insist on their rights. And as you see with this priest, but it was hard, and not everybody could do it. It helped if you were a priest and didn't have children, didn't have family. So that was what I really wanted to talk about. But why I got involved with the priest particularly, that's a long story. I was not interested in Catholic Church, I'm not a Catholic. But I came across a piece of writing in the 60s, sometimes when I was already out in the United States, that was an excerpt from a novel by Jakub Demo, who was a kind of a crazy poet and crazy writer, and I was absolutely the language was so pure and so beautiful and so outrageous at the same time that I was really struck by the writing. But I never planned to make a movie out of it because it didn't have much of a story, and how you show this beautiful, rich language on the screen in the United States was not clear to me, so I forgot about it. But after about 10 years, I was looking to write something that could be produced cheaply. It was during the 70s, there were no independent movies being made. I was living outside of New York City. So it just so happened that I took elements of this story, and I lived for some time in Ithaca, where Cornell University is, and there were villages around that were very poor, but beautiful, because there were these structures, these beautiful old houses and there was this mixture of people who were living in there, students and hippies and priests, and everybody was living together. And I tried to do a similar kind of a story of a man who takes care of a dying woman who has children and the husband doesn't particularly like it. But I was interested in showing at that time also a kind of a rebellious spirit who insists on going his way. And actually we did get a little bit of money together, but not enough to make a film. And I again forgot about it for many years. And then 89 happened, and I was teaching at Columbia, and there was a student, my student, and he came and said, "What are you doing here? Why aren't you in Prague?"
No tak to snad ne.
Jde nahoru.
Vy musíte se mnou!
Promiňte, já nemůžu, trpím závratěma. Předci se ženili mezi sebou.
Hlavně byste nám nevymřel po meči, pane Kinský. Tak budu zase sám. A budu zase kladný hrdina a budu mučeník a celý svět mě za to bude nenávidět. A jsme tady. Tak pojďte, pane hrabě.
Jaký hrabě? Mám dělnický původ. Otec rubal uran, když jsem se narodil.
Vemte to! Pane Kinský, vemte tady tohle tam a natahujte. Natahujte. Natahujte.
I based many of the things that are in the film. They are not my invention. I based them on people I knew during the 80s. I used to go to visit my parents every second year or so because they were old and couldn't travel, and I wasn't going to just forget about them, which was something that the communist government didn't see, didn't like to see, but I just again insisted on my rights, and I always went there. And there was a little village up near Karlovy Vary, and there was again a mixture of people, of artists, of people from Prague, and of people who lived there. It was close to a small town, Nejdek. There were people who worked in the factories and so forth. And I met all these people there. So, for instance, I met a priest who had a very similar church, who was trying to get money to repair the roof, and he would tell me all these kind of stories about how you go and ask there and so forth. It would never occur to me, if I had to kind of write it out of my imagination, that I would put these aristocrats there, because I really truly didn't care about Czech aristocracy and what happened to them during the communism, but they were there. They were actually driving the ambulance there. The names were different. It was Count Czernin, and his wife was Lobkowitz, and those are names that are, on palaces all over Europe. After I met Michálek and we were talking about the casting, he actually knew a friend, Tony Kinski, who was another very interesting and very rich family with a very rich history. And so he was one of the sons of Count Kinski, and he had to ask his father for permission to use the name. So this was how it happened. I truly was not about to write a film about religion or about Catholics or about priests. I wanted to write about ways how to survive tyranny.
To je odejmutí státního souhlasu. Ale to myslím, že přece vám může být úplně jedno. Vy jste vyučený traktorista nebo něco takového, že?
Co se děje?
Vypadni! Za tohle to dostanete 10 let.
Za tu facku mě to stálo.
Vy chcete být mermomocí mučedník, co? Ale tu radost vám neudělám. Vy budete kýdat hnůj!
Can you tell us a little bit about your collaboration with Vladimír Michálek?
Yes,
so how did you get to know each other? And how did you find
well,
him, or how was the
there
process?
were people, when I had this screenplay, I was given a grant or offered a grant. I was going now to look for directors, and it wasn't so easy because I was looking. I mean, ideally, if Ivan Passer was available, I would have loved Ivan Passer because we were friends. But Ivan told me at that time, you need to find somebody who actually lived there, because you didn't live there. You talked to people, but you didn't live there. You have to find somebody. And I was looking, and Michálek made one film. He was much younger than I was. The film was called America. It was an adaptation of Kafka's novel. In fact, he took it was with collaboration of one famous theater in Prague. And I looked at that film and was quite, it was quite interesting because, again, it was something that wasn't obvious, that was hard to do, and I thought that he showed that he can do it. And especially what I liked was his handling of actors in that film. Pavel Landowski, who was a famous actor in Czech film, was usually known to destroy every film because he was so good. He draw attention to himself, and he was able to actually manage him. So I thought this guy could do it, and we didn't have enough money. I mean, we had to really do it on the cheap. But he came up with an idea to cast for the main role a comic who was very well loved. Everybody knew him. He was a mime, had a program on television, and was known, for these kind of roles. But when I saw him in a movie where he had a more serious role, and I thought to myself, this guy could act in anything.
Marianko. Marianko. Marianko, jak kdybych se mohl oženit, tak ze všech děvčat. Ze všech žen. Vyberu si tebe. Ty jsi to věděla. Já to vím.
I was very persuaded that this director, whom I just chose, was on the right track. And then he showed it in finding people. Many people were not actors, the children were not actors, all the old people in the church. So he found types of people around, and he found some interesting people also for the communist functionaries. That were really people like everybody, had their interests, and yet at the same time they were supporting a regime that was really rotten. And by 87, the regime was rotten. Everybody knew it, and it wasn't clear, how to get rid of it. So that was my interest in that.
Kostel zůstane otevřen. Jeho excelence pan arcibiskup to vyjednal. Ale ne kvůli vám, kvůli paní hraběnce. A státní souhlas máte taky zpátky. Vy jste jim něco podepsal.
To snad nemyslíte vážně.
It was done in the beginning of the 90s, where there was very high hopes, and I also felt that I had some kind of a debt to pay back to people who stayed, and I was away. So I perhaps when I see them now, perhaps these people just are too nice, but it looked so hopeful in the beginning of the 90s. Perhaps it doesn't look hopeful to you when you see the devastation. And by the way, every wall, every house actually existed. I mean, we shot in, on location. So the devastation and the way, the poor way people lived, it's hard to imagine when you come to Czech Republic these days, you know. So everything existed. The manor house with the pigs existed. The woman who comes to see it, okay, that I added, but I mean, such people existed, so I met them. I haven't seen the film for 12 years, maybe. So I look at it and I see all the mistakes we made. You know? It's very tough.
So I think that now we are going to open it up to you guys. So I have the mic. Are there any questions? Come on. Okay, good.
I came to New York in '96, and so I only saw the film in New York at Anthology, I believe it was the screening.
Yes.
And I really liked it then, and today I really haven't seen it since. So I saw it again today, and I must say it's so beautiful and so well, like, captures the time. I left in '96, so I lived in Czechoslovakia during the time that the film takes place, and I think that it's really what you say about Michálek, how he's really good at leading actors. He not only that he's great at leading actors, but it feels really authentic. Like everything in the film, like the way people behave and the way they talk, I really felt it was very fresh. And obviously it's based on your writing, so it's fantastic that you were able to.
I got a lot of help. I'm giving him. I really, I was mad when I saw the film, but I became his best friend, and we stayed friends, and we hope.
I think it's actually his best film.
I know. I keep telling him.
But thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Congratulations on a beautiful screenplay. Beautiful.
She's my friend.
You weren't supposed to say that. I loved when he talked about his dreams. I just loved when he about God and does man exist? Mm-hmm. Did you write that, or was that from the book?
That's an interesting thing. You write a screenplay and you see the film, but it's not the film that ends up on the screen. So I was very stubborn about the ending, because I wanted to use the ending that Demo, the author, had in his story, where he sits with this woman and she asks him, "Is there God?" And he tells her, "Don't worry, I have a very good friend who died, and she's going to look after you." That was kind of Demo's way of dealing with many of these things. I wish I could tell you about Demo, but it would be a long talk. And he was a really terrible person at the same time. I was kind of, I didn't know anything about him. I only learned it later. So he was this kind of terrible anti-Semite, for instance, and I only found out later. And I was always, it wasn't in the movie, but you get good with terribly bad all the time. I don't know what I was talking about. So I had an ending. I had an ending where, to me, it seemed natural that the priest, after all this, goes away from the village, packs up and goes away. And there is a very moving scene in Demo where this terrible dog who is annoying and very dangerous all through the story, hates the priest and wants to always bite him. But toward the end, he runs after the priest as he leaves the village, and the priest touches the dog and pats him and says, "I know you missed her. I missed her too." And I thought this was just perfect. I didn't see any reason for rewriting it. And I was not there when the film was shot. I spent about only 2 weeks. And Michálek told me, you know, this is no ending. No Czech would leave. You don't know, I mean, you don't have anywhere to go. I mean, how do you... That didn't occur to me. I didn't know it. So I said, okay, but I'm not rewriting it. So I packed and went home. And he wrote the last scene in the church. And before that even he wrote another big scene where the priest is thinking about God. And I said no. so, you know, that the scene where he talks to these people in the church was actually what they put together without me. I can't forgive them for that. The dreams I used, but I used part of demos when there is about the word, the light is the word, you know, that passage. That was from demo, not from The Forgotten Light, but from another text. And I was always trying to use that kind of language in the, you know, when he was giving the, what is it called? Well, sermon, okay. So I didn't know how to write a sermon. I just made it up. So.
So you were just talking about how as a screenwriter, you watch this movie and you see all the mistakes. And so I was just kind of wondering, you know, obviously we watch it and we don't see any of the mistakes. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that and what maybe you would change besides the ending.
You know, I had a feeling that it was edited at a very slow pace. And I didn't like certain cuts, you know. It is what I say, you know, when you write the screenplay, you don't see every shot, but you see a kind of a movie, you know, I mean, and then when you see it on the screen, it is not quite the same. So for instance, because it was about death, I wanted especially to have young children there and have the freedom that I remember when I had as a child, the boys running down and you know, and meeting in the woods and this kind of you know, this kind of hope, this kind of their mother is dying, but they are having a fantastic time. That's what I wanted, and I felt that there was a little bit not done in the way that I imagined it. The boys were also local boys, and they were not actors. The girls were, the older girl was Žilkova's daughter, and she I think ended up as an actress. But that kind of stuff, you know, I felt that it had to have these layers, kind of. So those are the things that I also feel when I see it these days, that the mixture of tones, you know, didn't quite work. The shooting with the dog in the church surprised me. I mean, I saw it as a kind of a, you know, incidental, stupid thing that happens. And this was made so dramatic, also with dramatic music. I thought this was a little bit out of. The same thing with those deers, you know. Those are the things that you don't see in the screenplay. It so happened that there was a farm where they were raising deers, you know, on the location. All I wanted was to show that these communist bosses go into the woods with their, with their cars and shoot, have like. Now I'm sorry, I forgot all English. So, they hunt animals. I mean, regular hunt. Well, I don't know what they did there. To me, it looked like some strange, sci-fi or something. But I don't know, maybe you don't have that feeling. But again, I think that comes from, when you see it, then you become a little disoriented when you see it in real.
Any more questions? One more question.
Okay. So I was just kind of wondering, as you were talking, do you think that, would you prefer that this film sort of capture a moment in time, or do you think that the meaning will change as history goes on and time goes on?
I have no idea what it means today, actually. I have to tell you, this film was not done to educate or to show Americans what we lived through, or I would say we, because I knew all these people. It was for Czechs. It was a small film. I don't know. I know that it's been shown on television all the time. As I said, every time there is a disaster, they show this film. So, it's like, okay. But I know that people look at it, and feel that something like that was possibly happening then. But I have no idea. I think that we will have to learn here too how to live and say no when it needs to be said. And that really is the lesson from Havel too. So.
It's time to make a part 2. Right?
I am going to make another film,
Good.
but in Iceland this time.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So, guys,